when we first began to understand the huge effect to which COVID-19 would be affecting us, both as individuals and as our church life, it was rather like watching a family come to terms with the fact that a bereavement was about to take place in many ways. People struggled with the idea that something that they had been used to having without any questions asked would soon not be available. And remember, in Britain, when the measures started to be taken, we were in the middle of Great Lent. The Sunday of the Cross was the last Sunday at which, although by that stage we'd already finished having services, it was still possible for people to come to the church by themselves to pray. And then very shortly after that, there was a complete closure of churches as the lockdown became more rigidly enforced. We, in my parish, were fortunate in that for some months we had already been streaming audio of our services online in order to help those who were housebound and unable to get to the liturgy. So there was something in place. But we were not prepared for the great sense of loss or bereavement, I would say, that people began to show at not being able to come to church, at not being able to receive the sacraments, in particular, not being able to receive communion. Bear in mind that this was in Lent, when people are paying, one might expect, more attention to their spiritual life, to increased church attendance, to greater effort with prayer and with fasting and with spiritual reading and works of mercy and so on. And here we are, all of a sudden, forced into a situation where we are in isolation. After a while, my realization was that for many people, a new reality was in fact dawning, and that people would have to be adaptable, both as individuals and we as a church community, to the new situation. And we watched and we saw how very many different church communities began to stream liturgical worship online, or provide different areas of support for people in terms of their life of prayer, or offering online discussion groups and talks and Bible studies and so on. But I think that perhaps for me, one of the most positive aspects that I have seen coming out of the different circumstances relating to the pandemic has been the way in which the community has grown in strength in terms of its care for one another. The Apostle St. Paul tells us to bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. And I have noticed how both in the within the church community, but also in the wider community at large, people have made a real effort to reach out to one another. And we have had to be very organized in the way that we've done this in terms of practical support, mutual burden bearing, keeping in touch with one another. And all of these seem to me to be an extension of our Eucharistic community. It's been a big deal looking at the question as to how the church can be the church without the Eucharist. Can the church be the church without the Eucharist? And I suppose we'll come on to ask some of those questions in the course of this discussion. But just to conclude, I would, for the time being, I would say that I noticed within my own parish, within my own church community, an extension of what it means to be a Eucharistic community, an extension of what it means to live the liturgy beyond the liturgy.